apart. Have a great talk. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you. Well, I'm doing a project on public relations this morning, and I'm looking forward to giving you some of my findings. In 2009, there was an ESPN headline for a former Washington Redskins player, at that time Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders. And the headline said this from ESPN. It quoted what he said on Twitter. He said, "All you fake half-hearted Skins fan I won't go there, but I dislike you very strongly. Don't come to FedEx to boo, dimwits. No, I didn't play, but I still made more than you in a year, and you'd gladly switch spots with me in a second." This player went on to say, "I was talking to the fans who said the crazy stuff. I'm used to hecking, but I've never been booed in my own stadium. The question is, who are you to say you know what's best for the team and you work 9 to 5 at McDonald's?" That is a direct quote from a Washington Redskins NFL player in 2009. I was studying communication studies at this time, and that I was doing a project where I used this quote, and I was standing in front of my class giving this quote about social media, and then went on to talk about the project that I was going to be doing. But I stood there after giving this presentation, letting my class know what I was going to be doing for this project. And I thought to myself, the PR for this player and for the Washington Commanders after this social media post is a disaster. Now, I don't know about you, but I forgot a lot of things I learned in college. And my professor may at one time have said something about public relations more in depth than what I remembered. But the only thing I remember my professor talking about when it came to public relations was one of the best methods is to ignore the circumstance. He brought up the Tiger Woods incident, for example, when Tiger Woods had a public relations nightmare. And he said, perhaps it'd be better if Tiger Woods just simply ignored the situation, didn't say anything, and went on with his life. And that's all I could remember. And when I looked at this quote, I always thought to myself, I'd like to go back and look at this from a public relations standpoint. And I am so glad that Toastmasters offered me the possibility to go back and look at this more in depth, because I know this is shocking, but I think my professor was wrong. I thought he was on a pedestal. I thought that this guy knows everything about PR, but the only thing I remembered him saying was ignore the situation. But fellow Toastmasters, when I look at this quote, I think, what a public relations nightmare. Is it the best policy to ignore this circumstance if you're the Washington Commanders NFL team? And so today, I just want to go through some things I learned through this project that I thought were really good insights into public relations. And hopefully we as a fellow Toastmasters can kind of look at this as if we were together on a public relations team and say, what would be the best policy? Is it really the best to ignore it? Or are there other ways that could handle this situation? One of the things I learned quickly from taking this quick course through public relations with Toastmasters is this: there's 3 purposes. Number 1, to create positive public opinion where none currently exists, to reinforce existing positive opinion, or to change existing negative or neutral opinion into a positive opinion. Now, I can't see everybody in the room, but just show of hands, how many of you would say that number 1 would fit this circumstance? Any of you? What about number 2, to reinforce existing positive opinion? Or show of hands for number 3, to change existing negative or neutral opinion into positive opinion? I would vote number 3. Yes, on this area of public relations for this particular situation. There's a negative situation going on, and the Redskins needed to figure out, or the Commanders now needed to figure out, how do we spin this and create a better connection with our fans now that we have this negative PR going on from a social media post? What was interesting as a side note is I was really fascinated by social media and how it had changed the game of athletics when it came to fans and athletes. Because now you have situations where a pro franchise cannot control what a player puts out on their social media, or at least they're not always able to monitor it. And it might get posted before the team can even say anything to the player. And that's what happened here. And now the team has to figure out a way to shift this existing negative, neutral opinion, not really neutral, but negative opinion. How do we change that as an organization? So there's a few things that I've looked at, and there's things that go along with public speaking with PR that I didn't really think about before. And I learned that quickly through this course with Toastmasters. Know your objective, define your message, identify your audience. I think when we look at these categories, we would be able to say, yeah, all these things would fit this situation with this player. But what really fascinated me with this was, then what is the next thing that the team should do? And this is what I want you to think about if you're looking at PR at all with our Toastmasters club, or you're just looking at it from a standpoint of how do different organizations deal with PR? Maybe you're a fan of athletics, or maybe you're looking at politics, or whatever the areas you're looking into or you're interested in. How do we spin PR, and what kind of method are they using? The first one that the Washington Commanders could have used for this player after this tweet, and as I looked at this, I thought, what would I do? Would I do what my professor told me and just ignore it if I'm the organization, or would I choose one of these areas? And one of them is quick statement to the media. Call ESPN if you're the Washington franchise and tell them, hey, this is what we want to put out there. This is what's really going on. Do you make a quick statement to ESPN to try to get in front of the story? Or do you just, again, let it go and say nothing? That's one way to handle PR. I mean, you can look at politicians when there's a scandal, perhaps, and do they put out a statement quickly? They ignore it. It's interesting to look at that through that lens and just think about what is it, what method is being used in this circumstance. The next one down here is, or you pitch a story. Maybe you pitch a story to a local news journalist and say, hey, we have to put this side of the story out. Maybe you could write up a story of how this player tweeted out an apology later, and what this player really said and what led into it, and how social media is playing a role between fans and players. That's another strategy they could have used. But I think there's a better one, and this is the one I believe they should have used, and I would have recommended them using after looking at Toastmasters. And what amazed me about this course in Toastmasters is that the information I learned here was actually more in depth than I learned in college, and I thought was more helpful. But as I looked at the scenario and I thought back to that day when I started this presentation off with that quote, and I looked back at how would I have handled this from a PR perspective, because I've always wondered about that situation. How would I have handled it? What would be recommended? And I believe this next part is what I would have done. If I was running PR for the Washington franchise, I would have set up an interview. I would have called the local news, a podcast, radio, a webcast, a YouTube channel that covered the team. And I would have had that player get on and do an interview where fans can connect with that player personally. They can connect with them and hear his side of the story and understand the apology that maybe he's giving in that interview and reconnect with the fan base. Another way to do this, lastly, is to also hold an event. Maybe the team has an event and they bring that player in, they have him sign autographs and connect with fans that way. But I really believe that this set up the interview, as I analyzed the situation for this pro player, would have been to set this interview up to reconnect with the fans. I'm grateful for Toastmasters. I'm grateful for the opportunity to go back and study this. I didn't even know this was an elective class that you could take through pathways. I was so excited to revisit this one-time controversial situation from an NFL athlete and go back and how would Toastmasters have handled this? What are the methods that they would have recommended to use? Many of the examples we're dealing with from the Toastmasters perspective on how to grow your club or how to use PR for a club. But I was thankful to take it from a different angle of this project I did in college and always being interested in what I have done. Would I have followed what my professor was recommending, or are there other methods for PR that Toastmasters has? And I loved studying this. And so in summary, I learned a great deal. I believe we can take this into our club to create public relations. I believe we can analyze other situations from a PR perspective on how are these different places handling these situations and what methods are they using. Thank you.